At one time or another, I'm sure we've all aspired to be great, or at least thought about it. We've seen the sports star with their fans, the actors with their red carpets, and the influencers with their millions of followers. But what if none of that is evidence of true greatness? What if true greatness has few fans, no flash of the red carpet cameras, and only recognized by one? Jesus still wants us to be great. He just redefined what greatness really is. We're in John chapter 13 this morning. This is the third message in our Gospel Life series, realizing that the gospel, studying, focusing on the fact that the gospel is not just a message we believe, but it's a model for life. And as followers of Christ, we are to be so deeply impacted by the gospel that it flavors our life, that it transforms our life, and that it models our life as we relate to God and to others. The first message in this series was realizing that the gospel life calls us to be intentional, and we looked at the Great Commission. Last week, we looked in the second message of the series to focus on the fact that we are called to be selfless and focus on the lives of others. And this morning, we find ourselves in John 13. We're in the middle of the final week of Jesus' earthly life in that sense. He's in the large upper room. He has his disciples gathered with him. And in John chapter 13, they are going to be celebrating the Passover. He is going to be instituting the Lord's Supper. He is going to wash his disciples' feet. And then he's going to go out into the Garden of Gethsemane. That's where this takes place. This scene this morning in the upper room, and though it would be true of every occasion in Jesus' life, definitely right now in this scene, everything should have been about him. All of the attention, all of the focus should have been on Jesus as he was center stage. But in this moment, when everything should have been about him, we see that Jesus, as he has always done, empties himself and gives us the greatest example of humility and service in our lives. And in John chapter 13, if you'll follow with me, verse 1, it says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And during supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. And then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. And he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, 'Lord, do you wash my feet?' Jesus answered, 'What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand.' And Peter said to him, 'You will never wash my feet.' Jesus answered him, 'If I do not wash you, you have no share with me.' But Simon Peter said to him, 'Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head.' And Jesus said to him, 'The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you.' For he knew who was to betray him. That is why he said, 'Not all of you are clean.' And when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, 'Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I've given you an example that you should also do as I have done unto you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you do these things, if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. I love that John, probably more so than any of the other gospel writers, has this incredible ability of taking both the divinity of Jesus and slapping it right up against his humanity. Now, no doubt all of the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are good to identify the divinity of Jesus and that he is God, and also the humanity of Jesus and that he is man. But John, seeming better than all of the rest, takes the humanity, puts it on display, and slaps it right next against the divinity of Jesus. And what I mean by that is this. Before John ever takes us on this journey of Jesus' condescension and his humility, he rises us, he raises us up to the level to see who this guy is. Notice what he said in the very opening verses of this chapter. It says, Jesus knew that his hour had come. Jesus was fully aware of the time in which he lived. He was fully aware of the plan. Look at verse 2. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot to betray him. What does it say? Jesus knew his time. He knew the plan. And if you look in verse 3, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper, laid aside his outer garments, took a towel, tied it around his waist, and began to wash the disciples' feet. What a contrast. He knew the time, he knew the plan, he knew everything that was taking place, and he had all things delivered into his hands. Think about this phrase that John uses. He had all things delivered unto him by his Father. All authority, all power, all possessions were his. And having all things in his hands, delivered to his hands by the Father, he then is recorded by John as saying that having all things at his disposal, all things within his possession, he rises and takes a towel and begins serving. Friends, we have just witnessed this remarkable journey of both the majesty of Jesus slammed right up against the humility of Jesus. We see Jesus as God in possessing all things, and Jesus as man who came to truly serve his disciples. Now, for many of us, much of this story goes right over our head. I mean, when we hear washing feet, there's about half of you statistically that just check out, okay? It conjures up, images of funguses and dirt and all that stuff, and you're just like, I'm done. But understand what was going on and taking place when Jesus did this. Because in that place, in that culture, and in that climate, very arid, very dusty, very dirty, they had to walk on those roads. That was their main means of travel. They didn't have closed-toed shoes. They often wore the sandals, and it got their feet incredibly dirty. Dirt would go all the way up their legs as they walked those dusty roads. So when someone would invite people over to their home, it was customary that someone would wash their feet. It was a sign of honor to your guest. It was a sign of hospitality that you would be providing that for them. And it wasn't done by the master of the house. Don't make a mistake about it. The master of the house was not the one who washed the feet. It was a servant that washed the feet. And it wasn't just the servant. It was the lowest ranking servant in the house. It was the intern's job, in a sense. I say that jokingly because some of our interns are here. It was the lowest ranking servant's job to wash the feet of the guests, to honor them. And I want to move through this story by asking one question with 4 parts. One question with 4 parts. When we're all done, we'll have one long question that is left for us to answer. And the first part of this question, number one, is this: how could someone so great? Think about this part of the question. How could someone so great? What an incredible story. When we take what we know out of John chapter 13 of what transpired in that upper room, we mix that with what we know in the rest of the New Testament, including the book of Revelation, we understand that Jesus, the Son of God, the one in whom every knee will bow and tongue shall confess, is in this moment bending his knee to wash the dirty feet of his disciples. You know, if you think about it, we've given a lot of names to God. Even this morning, we have sung many names and ascribed many things to God. But if you think about it, if we exhausted every concordance we had, if we dove to the depths of every possible word for glory and greatness and majesty and holiness in our dictionary, if we were to come up with the greatest name for God that would ascribe to him his majesty and his greatness and his glory, I promise you that word, no matter how good we think it is, would still fall short of the glory in which he deserves. So here, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, or if we will, the Master of Masters, the greatest person to have ever walked the face of the earth, is now seen in this picture as taking the form of a servant. How could someone so great, so magnificent as Jesus, how could someone so holy, so high and lifted up, how could someone who had all of the praise of all of the heavenly hosts put himself there? Number one is, how could someone so great? Just think for a moment of the greatness of God. John wants us to. That's why he said all things have been delivered into his hand. That's why John says he knew all things. That's why John goes to such great work to paint that picture for us of the divinity of Jesus, because he's about to drop and show us how low Jesus really went. So notice the second point this morning. How could someone so great serve in such a lowly manner? I just found out that one of my friends had been recognized as the top CFO, Chief Financial Officer. It's a big deal. I've known this man for quite a little while, and he served as upper management, a high-ranking executive in several companies. And when I saw that he had been recognized as CFO of the Year for 2020, it was no surprise to me. See, everybody else got to see something that many of us that knew him knew all along. And what most people, hardly anybody, would know, except a few, was that 15 years ago, this guy that just got recognized as the top CFO for 2020, this guy 15 years ago walked into my office, was a member of my church. He walked into my office and he said, "Pastor, my family and I want to serve. Is there anybody cleaning the church?" I said, "Yeah." There's a lady, named her, and I said, "But she's looking for someone to take over." He said, "My family and I will do it, and we don't want paid." You see, what people didn't realize was that that guy who has now been recognized as the top CFO of the year for 2020, they didn't realize that 15 years ago he was cleaning toilets for free as an act of service and worship. He knew that there were other things that he could not do, didn't have the ability to do, but he saw it right in front of him. Isn't it funny that oftentimes we want to serve according to our strengths? I want to serve according to my strengths. But this kind of service, does not serve according to its strengths. It serves to meet needs. That's important. It doesn't serve to be according to its strengths. This was not, as we would say, the strength of Jesus. Jesus served to meet a need. Now think about this. How could someone so great serve in such a lowly manner? Think about this act. This is really incredible. For this final week of Jesus' life, there is a really toned down sense in miracles. Look, let me give you a few examples of some of the big miracles that Jesus did the final week of his life. He cursed the fig tree. He healed Malchus's ear. We're struggling to find other things that Jesus did. Now, let me tell you something. I don't know that the kingdom of darkness was really pushed back by the cursing of the fig tree. The reason I say this is this. This last week of Jesus' life, if I was Jesus, I'm telling you guys, I would have a whole repertoire of things I would want to do on that final week. Not the least of which would be coming in on a cloud, okay? I mean, I can tell you there are a lot of things I would want to do. I would want to show everybody that last week of my life. I would want to prove to everybody in Jerusalem. I would want to rub the noses of the religious leaders in my divinity. That's what I would want to do. I would want to strut right down Main Street, Jerusalem, showing them that everything they said about me was wrong. But what we find in that last week of Jesus' life is a very muted miracle season. And please understand what I'm saying in this. On the surface, this act was one of the most unmiraculous things Jesus did. Think about it. Was anybody saved as a result of this? Would we say that the kingdom of God or kingdom of darkness was pushed back greatly because Jesus did this? No, truth be told, this act didn't even last but a few hours. Because shortly they're going to be going back out onto the dusty roads, out to the Garden of Gethsemane. They're going to be laying and sleeping on the ground. They're going to be running for their lives after Jesus is betrayed. They're going to be hiding in homes. Their feet are going to get dirty again. If you think about it, this is one of the more unmiraculous acts that Jesus ever did. But like the cross, Jesus has taught us that his acts did not have to be miraculous to be powerful. And here, he does something incredible. When everybody else should have been lined up to wash his feet, he puts aside everything else. In a moment when all the attention should have been on him, the attention was on others. In a moment when he was about to become sin for you and I, in a moment when he had just uttered the words, "Father, save me from this hour." What can I say? Father, save me from this hour, but for this very hour I had come. No great blow to Satan. Nobody's soul was saved. Their feet would get dirty again. And on the surface, it's one of the more unmiraculous things he did. How could someone so great serve in such a lowly manner to a group of people so unworthy? You see, if Jesus is doing this act, we would walk away from this thinking, well, those disciples must be really special people. I mean, for the Son of God to wash their feet? No. In fact, do you know what was taking place at this season? Let me give you an idea. Luke chapter 22, verse 24 through 27. It should be on the screen. You can follow with me or listen as I read. Luke's account, same moment, same upper room. A dispute also arose among them, the disciples. as to which of them would be regarded as the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors, but not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who reclines at table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at table? But I am among you as one who serves. Mark 9:35, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. You see, Jesus, when I say, how can someone so great do something, serve in such a lowly manner for those who are so unworthy? Jesus breaks this discord, breaks this argument up by pushing himself away from the table, dressing like a slave, and beginning to wash their feet. Jesus was giving them the object lesson. Without question, everybody in that room understood exactly what greatness really looked like. The one who deserved to have his feet washed was now washing others. Peter got it right, didn't he? Peter understood the weight and the gravity of this thing. Peter understood the role of the lowest slave, and he saw the greatness of Jesus, that he is the Son of God. So when Jesus comes to wash his, no, not mine, Lord, you are not going to wash my feet. And I would love to think that every one of us, if we were in that situation, we would have thought the same way. Peter didn't understand. You see, it wasn't just that they were so unworthy because their focus was on themselves, while it should have been on Jesus. And Jesus turns their worldview upside down to say, greatness is not in who serves you, but greatness is in how many you serve. You see, this act, this group so unworthy, they didn't get it. Jesus even said, what I'm doing now, you're not going to understand. You'll get it later. Oh, man, how many of us, if we were doing something so magnificent, we would want to make sure they understood, right? We would tell them, do you understand this? This is what I'm doing. This is how big of a deal this is. I mean, do you realize who I am? We would want them to know. Jesus said, you don't understand this. You're going to, but you don't right now. And let me say, not only was this a group so unworthy of such an honor, I can't get this out of my head, guys. I can't. Jesus washes the feet of Judas. Now, think about that for a minute. John already tells us Jesus knows exactly what he's doing. He knows who's going to betray him. He knows how he's going to betray him. Jesus would have known the amount that Judas had agreed. Jesus literally washed the foot of the heel that was lifted against him. That's big. Can you imagine? I know we can. In this little mental motion picture. Can you imagine that scene with me? Judas knowing he's going to go out and betray him. And then to know that Jesus knows. And then to know that the one that you're about to sell for the price of a slave is literally being a slave to you. How could someone so great do something so lowly for a group of people so unworthy? I told you this is one of the more unmiraculous acts Jesus did. Oh, but it's beautiful, isn't it? What a precursor to the cross. Because you know what? I can use this same outline for Calvary. How could someone so holy and great do something so lowly for a group of people so unworthy? Number 4, final part of the question. and command us to do the same. How could someone so great serve in such a lowly manner for a group so unworthy and then command us to do likewise? It's been said that humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. What a great way to put that. You see, when you and I think about this and we're thinking about how do I live this out? How do I apply these principles to my life? Some of you may say, Pastor, my heart's not in it. Let me tell you something. You get on your knees long enough, you start serving people right where you are, your heart will come around. It will. I don't care if your heart's not in it. You heard me say it. I don't care if your heart's not in your service. Sometimes your service grabs a hold of your heart. Think about this with me. There are so many things in the Scriptures. We know we're supposed to be like Jesus. We know it. You've heard it before in here and all your life that Christians are supposed to be like Jesus. And there are so many things we see and read in the Scriptures about Jesus, and we walk away saying, I can't do that. Listen, guys, Jesus lowered the bar here. He lowered the bar so every one of us could clear it. Every one of us. Friends, make no mistake about it. This has nothing to do with abilities. It has everything to do with humility. Everything. It's not, can I do this? It's, will I do this? Jesus, in this one act, literally removed every possible excuse we could have. I dare you, I challenge you to find a way that you can excuse away living out this kind of service in your life. What are we going to say? God, I'm too good for it? I'm too important? Of course we would never say that out loud. We might feel it in our hearts. We might have it right here, God. I mean, there are some things I won't do. Let me tell you something. Is there anything that we should be willing not to do for Jesus? Of course, nothing unrighteous. That's not what I'm saying. The list of things that we would not do for Jesus that are ultimately good and right should be non-existent. Am I going to say, God, I'm too important? No. Am I going to say this? God, I can't do it? No. How can I say I can't do it? You know what this cost Jesus? This one act cost a little bit of time and a lot of pride. That's it. A little bit of time and a lot of pride. You know what it's going to cost us to do this? A little bit of time and all of our pride. God, you don't understand. They're jerks. Let me tell you something. If you have identified someone as a jerk, even the more reason to wash their feet. If you have seen and realized, come to the conclusion that that person is not a good person, even the more reason we should follow in the footsteps of Jesus to do good. You see, this world, you've heard me say and you've heard others say, is dying to hear the gospel. Let me say something different than that. This world is dying to see the gospel. This world knows that we can say whatever we want. In this climate of heated political rhetoric, we can say whatever we want and portray ourselves to be whoever we want. But we have a world that is dying to see something real, something authentic, something unusual because normal isn't working. They're wanting to see someone's life who has truly been transformed, not just simply through the words of their mouth, but to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. This world may not know much about theology, but one thing they do know is that followers of Christ are supposed to look like Christ. And this world is not just dying to hear the gospel, they're dying to see the gospel. And those of us who look at this outline, not just as an outline of what happened in John 13, but as an outline for our life, that someone so great did something even greater than wash my feet. He washed my heart. And in doing so, I was so incredibly unworthy. Listen, that truth, the gospel, should literally break us down. Not beat me down. That's not what the cross does. The cross does not beat me down. The cross elevates me. The cross says, you are this worthy. You are worthy of this gift because of what Jesus did. Myself, I have no worth, but God ascribes worth. When those disciples were sitting in that room to see the King of Glory emptying himself of that and becoming a servant, not only showed much about him, but it honored the disciples. What's the world going to see? What does foot washing look like for us? I'm not going to exclude. If you want to wash feet as a sign of service, man, do it. Praise God. This means putting yourself aside, focusing on others, being willing to take the position of lowliness. Put others above yourself. Philippians chapter 2, before that great Christ hymn of verse 5 through 11, it says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. Nothing. That you and I are to have a life so marked by the gospel, that we have been elevated to the place that we now understand what it means, and we can serve the world. What will the world see? Self-centered, conceited, or self-sacrificing, humble? My decision to serve you is not dependent on how you treat me. My decision to serve you is because I have been served greatly. And that cross of Calvary tells me we're all on the same playing field. The cross of Calvary has brought me to my knees, and while I'm down here, I'm going to serve. We're halfway through this series, and every one of these messages, every one of these topics says it's not about me. Intentional. I'm not living for me. Outwardly focused. I'm not focused on me. Humility and service. It's not about me. You've never trusted Christ. Friend, let me tell you something. He not only washes feet, he washes hearts. And today, every sin, every wrong that you've ever committed towards God, every sin, both of acts of commission and omission, he stands ready to forgive completely at the cross because he is so great and that act was so low and we were so unworthy, and he's asked us to do likewise.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to our podcast at First Baptist Joplin. If you are interested in coming and worshiping with us live, we would love for you to come at 9 and 10:30 on Sunday mornings.